Welcome to this API Gateway course, and let's see what we are going to cover in this particular API Gateway course of AWS. First, we are going to start with the basics of API Gateway. What is the API Gateway and why should we use the API Gateway of AWS? Secondly, we are going to take a look onto the various API methods which include GET, PUT, POST, PATCH, and what are the different HTTP codes which we should know when we are going to work with the API gateways. Once you have a decent understanding on API Gateway and various API methods, then we are going to create our first API Gateway through our AWS portal so that you feel comfortable how you can create a minimalistic API Gateway to begin with. After that, we are going to take a look onto the HTTP APIs and REST API features of an API Gateway. What is the difference between these two and when we should use those? And after that, we are going to increase the complexity, and then we are going to take a look onto the proxy and non-proxy integration of our API gateways with the Lambda. Increasing the complexity of this particular topic, then we are going to introduce the authorizers. So authorizers will be there for API gateway so that you need to pass certain kind of a security token to access your API gateway. And finally, we are going to set up the Cloudwatch log so that we can see the logs of our APIs which we have developed in our API gateways for troubleshooting and development purpose. So that's how I have structured this particular course, and this particular quadrant is for beginner where you will know how to work with the API gateway, and this particular lower quadrant where we are going to configure the API gateway in a way that it is ready to use for a production deployment. And also please check out my courses on Udemy for AWS and Azure if you really want to excel your career into DevOps and cloud. I'll post the link into the description section. Before we jump into the demo of our API gateway, it's really important for you to understand what the API is, what are the power of an API and what you can do with the APIs. So let's first learn few concepts which are really essential to master the API gateway in AWS. So first and foremost, what API stands for? The API stands for Application Programming Interface. And what the API actually does. So here is a very simple illustration which can describe what API actually does. So here is me. I'm trying to use the API gateway of AWS, and what it is helping me to access the data, to access the business logic, and also to access the backend service. So it is a two-way communication, but this API gateway is just a gate to allow these kind of a communication. So with the help of API gateway, I can access and update the data. I can even access our business logic which is running behind in our AWS different services, and also the backend services which can include like a EC2, which can include RDS, which can include your S3, which can include your Lambda. So everything is possible with the API gateway, and API gateway is just a gateway to provide an access to these services which are running into the different services of our AWS. Now, the next question is like where API Gateway helps in. So it helps in creating, publishing, maintaining, and monitoring and securing your various APIs. So for example, this access data can have more than 1, 2, or 10 APIs, or maybe more than that. Similarly for business logic and backend service. So all of these APIs which you are creating through the API Gateway, it can be managed, it can be published, it can be maintained, it can be secured with the API gateway. So API gateway is a service which enables these all mechanisms which can be implemented for securing, maintaining, scaling your APIs to safeguard your business logic, your data, as well as your backend services. Now, what you can create with the API gateway. So you can create a RESTful APIs, you can create a WebSocket API, you can put a containerized workload behind the API gateway, as well as the serverless workload, for example, Lambda behind the API gateways. Let's try to understand the workflow of API. So it is just a messenger which allowing you to communicate between the different software system and exchange that information in a secure and scalable way. So that's the purpose of our API. Here is one of the most realistic example which help you to understand the purpose of a messenger in API gateway. So for example, you went to a restaurant, there is a waiter waiting for your order. So once you place an order, then waiter goes into the kitchen and tells to the chef, hey, this is the order which a customer is demanding. And later on, then that particular chef prepares the order and waiter takes that order back to that particular customer. So this is what exactly the API does. So API is just an interface for a messenger which collects the order or collects the information, takes that information to the backend services, process that information, and once the information is processed, then the response is rendered and that response is again taken back to the end client. Now you might be wondering that which companies are using the APIs. So the answer is APIs are everywhere. So for example, here you can see there are multiple weather apps. So all of them are communicating through the APIs. There are healthcare system, there are government system, and their applications, as well as the ticket booking system which you use on a daily basis for booking your flights, train ticket, bus ticket. So all of these systems are heavily relying on these API to communicate and make those systems scalable, secure, and very easy to access for an end customer. Alright, so we have talked a lot about the APIs and the basic usage of API. Let's talk about what are the different types of APIs which are available into the AWS API gateway. So here is few examples I have taken over here, like a gate, put, post, patch, and delete. So these are the different types of operations which you can do through the API gateway. Don't worry, we are going to cover all of these in much more detail when we go into the demo. But here I'm just making you aware that what are the different types of APIs are available when you're going to work with the API gateways in AWS. All right, so here is one screenshot which I have taken from our AWS API gateway. When you are going to create an API gateway, then these are the options will be available for you. So here you can see these are the options which API gateway from AWS provides you when you are going to create an API through the API gateway. So there are like a gate, post, put, patch, head, options, delete, and any. So these are the different options which you need to choose to create your API. Let's talk about the get API. So here in this example, there are two types of arrow which I have created. One is the pink one, which is your request, which you can see, and this is the green one, which is the response. So this is an end client who is trying to use the get API. So in the pink, he sends the request, and request is processed by this backend system. And once the request is processed and the response is generated, and that response is again thrown back to this particular client, and this green arrows denotes the response. So what internally happens and what are the key thing which you need to keep in mind? So once the request is sent, then how will you know that your request is processed successfully? So for that, we have HTTP codes. That's the standards which we follow in the APIs, that you need to throw a proper HTTP code based on the request processing. So for example, if you receive the HTTP 200 code, which means your request has been properly processed and you have received the response successfully which you are expecting. So if you are receiving the expected response, then it will give you a HTTP 200 with the proper response. All right. And what is the response you are going to get? In which format the response you are going to get? So you can get a response in a JSON format, or you can even get in a text format. But that is only possible for your get request. So as the name suggests, it's a get. It is the purpose of this particular request is to fetch the information back. You want some information back from the backend system. That's why the purpose of this API is, or the name of this API is get. Now let's talk about the second API, which is post. So the first API, we were trying to fetch information back from the backend system. But how about if we want to store some information into the backend system? So for that purpose, we are going to use the post API. So here you can see this is the request which is going into the pink arrows. So this is the request which is in the form of post. So it will contain a payload which you want to store inside your backend system. And in the response, you are only gonna get the HTTP codes. So if your post is successful, then you are gonna receive a HTTP 200, which means you are able to save or store that particular information into your backend system using the post API. So that's the only response you are gonna get, because you're trying to store, but you're not going to fetch anything back. And the purpose, as I already told you, that it is to save and store the information, and for that purpose you are going to use the post API. Now let's talk about the delete. And as the name suggests, when you want to delete some information from the backend system, then in that case you are going to use the delete API. And again, you are going to receive the similar HTTP code, which is 200, and the purpose of this particular one is to remove the records or the data from the system. And there is a one more, which is patch, and as the name suggests, you are trying to patch something, which means you are trying to update some information back into the backend system. So for that purpose, you are going to use the patch API. So with the patch API, you will send a request, and again you're going to receive the response, and the purpose will be to update some information back into the systems. After covering the basics of APIs and API gateway and what different types of APIs are available, let's try to do a very simple demo to create our first API using the API gateway. So here is the flow which we are going to implement. So let's try to understand this flow first of all. So here we are going to use the API gateway, which you can see over here, and the request we are going to use is the GET request. All right, so once we create this GET request, then how this request is going to process. So for that purpose, we are going to use a Lambda, and that Lambda, and this is the code which we are going to implement inside the Lambda. So this is a very simple code, but we can tweak this code based on our need and based on your business needs as well. All right, but the key thing over here is this is going to be our backend system, which is going to process and return the response. All right, so where is the response? So here you can see this is the response which it is going to throw back to our API gateway. And here you can see, as I already told you, the response which we are throwing back is 200, and this is the type which we are throwing back is in the JSON format. All right, and here is the response data which we are throwing back to our customer. So once our request is processed, our Lambda code is executed, then our response is again thrown back, and that response is again generated back to our client. And this is the demo, which is a very simplistic demo, which will make you comfortable working with the API gateway. And later on, we are going to increase the complexity of this particular API gateway and explore the other features. Here is my AWS console, and the first thing which I would like to create over here is the Lambda. So if you take a look onto this particular diagram, then first let's create this Lambda, and then later on jump to the API gateway. So I'll close this one, go back to my AWS console, and in the search box, I'm going to type Lambda, click on this Lambda over here. And here click on create a function, and here I'm just gonna type my function name. So first, gateway Lambda, and here I'm going to use the runtime as a Python, but you have a various runtimes which are available over here which you can use, but the concept is going to be pretty much same whether you use a Node.js, Python, Java, or any other runtime environment for your Lambda execution. Okay, so after this, let's create this function over here. And once this function is created, then we are going to modify the body or the code of this particular Lambda function. All right, so I'm just going to dismiss this message. This is just a additional info which they are providing, but I just don't need it at this point of a time. So here you can see our Lambda has been created. This is the name of my Lambda, and here in the code section, here you can see this is the sample code which they have given to us. You can even use this particular code which will work fine, but in my case I just wanted to show you the HTTP response code as well as the response body in the JSON format. So that's why I would like to update this code block over here. So let me copy the code from my notepad which I have already prepared, and I'm going to share this particular code also, so please find into the description section the GitHub link for this particular repository, as well as the blog post link where I will be sharing this particular code. So just feel free to copy this code from there. All right, so here you can see this is the Lambda handler, and here is the response which it is going to throw back, and here is the status code which is 200, and the content type is application JSON. So that's very simple. So let's click on deploy first of all this particular Lambda so that it's deployed successfully. Okay, after deploying it, go to test. We want to test this Lambda also before we integrate with the API gateway. So here in the test section or the test tab, which is present over here, you can find a test option to validate your Lambda. To do that, here you can create a test event. So let's create a test event 1. And here like event JSON. So here we are trying to fetch information, so we don't need to pass any payload or the JSON. So I will keep this thing empty over here, and after that I'm just gonna click on save. Okay, so here it is expecting, so I need to remove this part only, and let's save this one. I think I'm making the mistake in the JSON structure, because it needs to be a valid JSON, and I was not passing. I removed the whole curly braces, that's why it was giving me an error. Anyway, let's move forward, and now I would like to test this particular. So this is the event which we have created, and the payload is completely empty, and here I'm just going to click on test over here, and here you can see it has succeeded, and see the response. So here you can see the status code, it is returning 200, content type is application JSON, and the body, it is returning this body, okay, where it is your message along with the status success, which you can verify from here. So this is the response body which it is returning. So which means our Lambda is working fine. So let's now see into the diagram. So this part we have implemented. So let's jump to the API gateway and implement your first API gateway with the GET request. To implement the API gateway, so in the search box, you need to type API gateway. Click on this particular API gateway over here, and here create an API. Click on that, and here we are gonna use the HTTP API. I'm going to explain the difference between the API for HTTP and REST API and WebSocket API. But let's first stick with the HTTP API because we need to create a GET API. So click on build over here, and here you need to enter the name. So let's type the name first, API gateway with GET. All right, so this is the very simplistic name I would like to put for my first API, but in your case, you can put a very meaningful name for your APIs. Let's click on next over here, and then click on next, and here the stage name. So I will explain the stage name in the later section, but let's stick with the default. I just don't want to increase any complexity over here. Click on next, and then click on create over here. So our API has been created, but this particular API has not been integrated with our Lambda. So the next thing is, so right now if you take a look onto this particular diagram, then we have created an API, but it is not integrated yet with the Lambda, and that's the second part we need to do. To start the integration with the Lambda, what you need to do, you need to create a routes, and these routes are where you're going to define the GET API. So click on create over here, and here in the request type, there will be various options, but here we are going to create a GET API, and then click on create over here. And here you can see our GET API has been created, but still we only created the GET API, but it is still not integrated with our Lambda. And once you click on this GET API, then it is going to give you the option for attach integration. So click on this attach integration over here, and here create an attach integration, which you can choose. And here from the integration target, you can choose a Lambda function. So here, if you type Lambda, then this Lambda function option will pop up over here. After that, it is going to ask you the Lambda ARN. So if you are working in the same region, I am working in the Frankfurt region. So you can choose that particular region over here and then choose the Lambda, which is visible over here. So this is the Lambda which we have created. So just select this particular Lambda and go at the bottom and click on create. And here you can see our integration is done with the Get API with the AWS Lambda. Now the question is how you are gonna access this particular API. So for that you need to find the URL. So right now we have done the integration. So this integration is done, and now a user needs to find the URL to access this API. So that's the next task which we need to finalize. So for that let's get back to our API over here. So here you can see this is the API. On the left hand side here you will find this API. So this is the first API gateway. This is the API which we have created. So click on this one, and here you will find the invoke URL. So this is the URL which you need to use to access your API. Okay, so here I'm just gonna copy this particular URL from here, go to the new tab and paste it over here and hit enter. And here you can see if I zoom it over here, the message and the status has been returned back. And if I show you into the raw format, then this is the raw format which you can see. This is the response we are getting back in the format of a JSON. Okay, and in the header here you can see this is the response which we got back from our AWS Lambda, which is accessed via API gateway. One more important thing, accessing the API gateway through the browser is quite okay, and it will work when you are accessing the GET request. But in case of put, post and patch, you will not be able to use it through browser because you need to send a payload. So for that purpose, you need to be familiar with some tools like Postman to test and validate those API requests. So I'm going to show you a Postman, how you can use the Postman for your future implementation of your API gateway. So here, just copy this particular URL from here and go to the Postman. So you need to install the Postman software onto your working laptop. It's free. You don't need to pay anything. And here in the URL, you can paste this particular URL, and from the drop down here, you will see all the options. So here get, post, put, patch, delete, add options. So here we are going to select get over here and click on send. And as soon as you hit that particular send button, then here is the response which you are getting back. So it's just the same thing which I tested with the browser, but I would like you to show that in the future or in the upcoming demo where we are going to experiment a lot with the API gateway. So I'm going to use Postman quite a lot to validate and test our API gateway requests. As I promised, let's take a look at the difference between the HTTP APIs and the REST APIs and which one we need to use it. So here is a quick difference which gives you a good clarity like which one you should use when you are implementing the API gateway services of AWS. So here on this particular section you will find HTTP API and there is a REST API. So here is the performance, cost, simplicity, request response mapping, API key usage plan, and OAuth, stage variable, course, and custom domain. So performance wise HTTP is quite fast, but REST API is bit slower. I would not put it like it's drastically slow, but it is a little bit slower, but still it's very scalable and very fast. But if you want to compare on a very granular level, then that's a slight difference between the HTTP API and the REST API, but both act the same or both fulfills the same purpose. Cost, the HTTP API is cheaper and REST API is little bit costlier. Simplicity, of course, HTTP API is much simpler. Don't worry, I'm going to show you the REST API after this, and that's where you're going to see the complexity of our REST API. Request response mapping, like here it is not supported in the HTTP API, and here it is supported, and this is what we are going to cover in our next demo where we are going to experiment with the proxy and the non-proxy Lambda, where we are going to modify the request and response. Okay, API key uses. So here in HTTP it is not supported, it is supported. OAuth, it is supported in HTTP but not into the REST API. Stage variable not supported here, but it is supported in the REST API. And the course, the native support is available, but here it is a manual support. And custom domain, both are supported. So in general, this is a basic difference between the REST API and the HTTP API. But for more scalability and more robust nature, I would still like to prefer the REST API. It gives you more control control more request response mapping power. So that's comes out of the box with the REST API, but still it's not something that I'm recommending REST API. It's just that it fulfills many of my needs, but in your case many of your requirements might fulfill with the HTTP API. So just choose wisely which one will fit your requirement based on these particular differences. Let's move forward, and now we have seen the HTTP API and we have implemented our first API gateway. Now I would like to take a few more examples from our REST API, and I'm gonna increase a little bit of a complexity by introducing the topic of our proxy and non-proxy integration. So first, let's focus on understanding the non-proxy integration of our API gateway with the Lambda. To explain the non-proxy integration, I would like to take this example because it is very easy for me to explain in that way. So here we are going to create an API gateway for an API called post. So we are going to use post this time. And in the post, we are going to send a payload, and in the payload will contain a name like a key, and the value is the name. So here this is going to be the key and this is going to be the value. And after that, once we send this payload through the API gateway, then we are going to take the power of our request modification. That is only possible with the non-proxy integration. So in that request, we are going to add a prefix, or we are just going to modify the value of our key. So here you can see initially we were passing only the name, and here we have just added a prefix over here. So this is a power of our non-proxy integration, where API gateway, when you do the non-proxy integration with a Lambda, it allows you to modify the request which is coming in and before it is getting processed with the Lambda. So here the name was coming over here, but here we have added a prefix, and then that response is being processed and then it is returned back. So right now, I'm just going to show you this particular part where we are just modifying this request. Response part, I'll leave it up to you so that you can experiment and test it. And then we are going to render this particular response after rendering or processing with Lambda, and this response is going to throw back to the end user. So that's the power of a non-proxy, because non-proxy integrations allows you to modify the request as well as the response, so that you have a more control on your request and response and what you are sending to the Lambda or a backend service. To start with the non-proxy integration, first go to the Lambda. I would like to create the Lambda first. So let's create a Lambda over here. Click on create a function, and here I'm going to type a non-proxy Lambda. Sorry for the typo, Lambda processor. Here I'm going to choose the version, which is going to be Python 3.10. You can choose any specific version if you want, and then click on create function over here. And once it's going to take a few minutes to create it, and after it is getting created, I'm just going to dismiss this particular message box. And here I'm just going to modify the code of this particular Lambda. I'm going to walk you through that particular code as well. So here is the code which I would like to modify. So here, what I'm taking here is like, here is the event, and here is the, from the event, I'm just going to fetch that particular attribute from the request header. So here, as I told you that I'm going to pass the name. So here I'm going to pass this particular name and the value. So I'm interested in fetching the key in the Lambda. So that's why I'm just processing that event. So this event is containing all the request header, and from that query string parameter, I'm just fetching the key and its value, and that value I'm going to return it over here with the response 200. So that's simple. Okay, so I'm just going to click on deploy over here. And first we are going to test this particular Lambda. So go to the test over here, and here create an event name. So let's create an event name, and non-proxy Lambda test 1. And here is the payload. So here we need to modify this particular payload, and here I'm going to pass as name equals, sorry, Rahul. And then click on save over here. Close this messages and then click on test. Sorry, there is some problem. I need to fix this particular error. To fix the problem, I just modified the code over here, which you can see. So here, instead of getting it from our query string parameter, I need to get it from the event, but that is something you don't need to worry about it. But this is the code which is now it will work. So here, let's deploy this particular code over here. And once you click on deploy, then it will give you a message, it is successfully deployed. So what it will do is it will fetch it from the event and it will look for that particular key, that is name, and then it will store it over here. And if it is able to find it, then it is going to return the status code as 200, and here it is going to print the value. All right, so now let's get back to the test over here. And here I would like to, I already created an event where I am passing the value as a Rahul, and then here I just need to click on test over here. And here you can see it is successful and the message it has returned is Rahul. If I would like to modify this one, then here let's change it to test, and then click on save and then click on test. And here you can see the details, and the response is returned is Rahul test. All right, so now my Lambda is ready, which I can show you from this particular diagram. So our Lambda is ready over here. Now we need to work on our API gateway, and here we are going to use the REST API. Let's create the API gateway for our REST API for the non-proxy integration. So here I'm going to type API gateway, click on this API gateway. Click on create API. I'm going to choose the REST API, click on build. I'm going to use the new API, then the name is Non-Proxy API gateway. After that, I'll just click on create API. And here you can see the API has been created. Now, the next thing is we need to create a source or the resource. So here we are going to click on resource, and here we need to specify the path. So here you can see this is the root path, but here I'm going to add my API. What is the name of my API? So here I am going to put non-proxy demo API. Then click on create resource over here, and our resource has been created. Now, after creating the resource, we need to create a method, and that method will enable us to let me show you, to have the power of modification of integration request. So first let's create the method, and then we are going to work on this request modification. Let's click on create method over here, and here we need to choose the method type. So here I'm going to use post over here. The type is going to use is Lambda function, and here you can see this particular option. So I'm not going to toggle or enable this option if it is disabled, which means we are using a non-proxy integration of Lambda with API gateway. Okay, let's close this one, and here we need to choose the Lambda. So here we have already Lambda created, which is a non-proxy Lambda processor. So select that one, and after that just click on create method. And here you can see our method has been created. And after the successful creation of this method, you can see the whole picture or the request flow which is happening between the Lambda and your client. So here you can see the method request. Here we need to modify the method request. Here we need to do the header modification where we can modify the param, which we need to add a prefix. And then here it is the Lambda which is going to process. All right. So let's first start with the method request. So here either you can click over here, or either here is also the same option, which you can see. This is also the same option. This is also going to be the same option. Okay. So here I'm just going to click on edit over here, and in the edit here we need to choose the request validator. So here just choose the request validator as a validate body, query string parameters, and header. So it's just another validator for your request. Okay, then URI query string parameter. So here we need to add it, and the query string for here is name, because we are passing key as a name and the value as a Rahul, which is my first name. So kept is as a required, because yes, this is the required request header which you need to request body which you need to pass in. Okay, after that let's save this one over here. And after that, we need to work on the request integration, which is this one. So here we are going to do the modification. So for that, what we need to do, you just need to go to the request integration, click on edit over here and select the Lambda function. And after that, if you go further down here, you can see the Lambda has already been selected. So if you go further down over here, then you're going to find an option for our mapping template. So here, this is the option which will allow you to modify your request body. So click on this mapping template, click on add mapping template. Here we need to choose the content type. So here I'm going to use the application /JSON. And after that, this part I would like to keep it as it is. I don't need to change anything. So here the template body, so which is important. So here I would like to copy one code. I'll show you over here. So here you can see this is the code which we need to use to modify our request which is coming in. So here again, I'm going to use the key which is name, which is going to pass over here. And here I'm going to add a prefix which is going to be a non-proxy, and this prefix I'm going to process it over here, and then it is going to pass it back to our Lambda. So here we are doing the request modification. So if I show you over here, which is this one. So here we are just trying to do this part over here. So here I have added a prefix. Let me see what I have done it over there. It's okay. So here non-proxy, I can just change it to prefix. Okay. After that, what we need to do, we just need to click on save over here. And now it has been saved. And now what we can do is we can do a sample test over here. So to validate or test, here is the option which is available. Before you deploy this API, you can still do the validation and testing. And once it is successful, then you can deploy your API. So close this one, click on test over here, and here is the query string. So here you can pass name equals Rahul or whatever value you want to pass in. Okay. And here click on test. And here you can see the response you are getting back is hello. And here is the prefix which has been added over here. This is the prefix which we have added as a the request header modification. So now which you can see from here. So this is the part which I was mentioning. So this part has been modified and we are getting the expected result. So what we can do now is if you go back to our AWS console and then here, then click on deploy API, close these messages, click on deploy API because we have validated. So here we need to choose the stage. So now here you can define various environment. Like if you want to have a dev environment, test, pre-prod and prod, then you can name those environment as a stage. So here I'm going to click on new stage and the name I'm going to put is like a dev and click on deploy. And here you can see our API has been deployed, and this is the invoke URL which you can see over here. And after deploying this, we can test it with our Postman. So how to test it, how to make a complete URL. This is still a half URL. I'll show you like how you can create a full URL and how you can pass the request param through the Postman. Let's open the Postman. So I'll go to Postman and here I'm just going to close this one. Don't save it. I just don't want to save this one also. Let's create, delete this one also. Let's create a new request and here change it to post over here. And then first of all, copy that URL. So here is the invoke URL, copy this one and paste it over here. So the key thing which I mentioned you is like environment, stage. So here you can see this is the stage which clearly tells which environment it is belonging to. So here it is a dev. So if in case if you want to promote this API, then you can change from dev to stage to prod as well. Anyway, okay, so this URL is not full. So we need to prepare a full URL. So for that, we need to go back and here we need to append the API name. So what is the API name which you're working with is Non-Proxy API Gateway. So copy this one and go to the URL and paste it over here. Okay. And here the query param. So here we need to pass name equals Rahul and then click on send. And here you can see Let me recopy the URL. I think there is some typo which has happened. So I'm going to copy this URL once again and go back to my Postman and change it to post, paste the URL, put the key as a name and a value as Rahul, and then click on send over here. And here you can see the value which I'm getting back. So here it is adding the prefix in front of my name. So if I change it to something like test value and then send it, then it will again add a prefix over here. So this is the power of our non-proxy Lambda, which allows you to do this kind of a modification. Although I have done the modification to the request, you can do the modification in the response as well. And to modify that particular response, what you need to do over here is if you go to let me go back, go to the first API, not first one, to the non-proxy API, and here if you go on to the post API, and here you will find the option. So here you can go to the integration response and you can do the modification to your responses as well. Let's talk about the proxy integration. And as I told you, the modification of a request and the response is not possible into the proxy. So if you are sending the parameter as a name as Rahul, then you cannot do these kind of things over here. Unless and until you have some specific code written inside the Lambda to modify that particular response, then it's fine. Otherwise, these features are not available into the proxy integration. Okay, and if I would like to show one part also, so here, like in the integration request, this is our non-proxy. So in our integration request, if you click on edit, then we had an option of our mapping template. So these options were available into our non-proxy, but once I'm going to create a proxy integration, then this whole option will not be available for us to do inside our proxy integration. Okay, so let's close this one, and I'll go back and create a Lambda first of all. So I can create a pretty much same Lambda. We don't need to change anything over there. So what I will do, I'll just create a Lambda function. So I'll put like a proxy Lambda, and after that I'm going to choose like a Python 3.10, and then I'm gonna click on create a function. It might take a few seconds because yeah, it's a Lambda creation. So I'll click on dismiss over here, and I'm just going to copy the code which I already used inside my non-proxy Lambda. So here in this particular section, I'm just going to remove and update the code over here. And after that, sorry, here I don't need to use that part. But anyway, click on deploy at this point of a time. I just want to copy the non-proxy Lambda code. So here I'll copy it from here, copy this particular code, go back to proxy Lambda and update it and deploy it. Okay, so it's pretty much the same Lambda, but only the part which I have changed is the proxy. The name of the Lambda has been changed. All right, just to identify with that we are using the separate Lambda for this one. All right, so it is doing the same thing exactly. If I am passing something, that is going to return back. If it is not, then it is not going to return it back. So all right, so here I see still a problem. It's still not able to copy it. So let's go to non-proxy Lambda. Go to the code section, and here click on copy, go back, and here just paste it over here. Okay, now it has been updated. Fine. Click on deploy. Okay, that's fine. Now we need to go back to our, let's close this one over here, go back to our API gateway. Click on this API gateway over here. Click on create API gateway, and here we are going to choose the REST, and here we are going to choose a proxy API gateway. Then after that, I'm just going to click on create API. Then here I'm going to click on create resource. Here I'm going to choose like a proxy API demo, then click on resource. And then here we are going to go and create a method and click on create a method over here and select the method, which is going to be a post, and type is lambda auth function. And here we are now gonna enable this option, which is this one. All right, so let's go and enable this option. And here we're going to choose the proxy lambda over here, and after that just go at the bottom and click on create method. And here you can see our proxy API gateway request method has been created. After that, go to the method request, click on edit over here, choose the validator, which is this one. After that, go to the query string here, add the query string, which is name, and put it as a required. After that, click on save over here. And after that, let's check the integration request. Do we have the option of modifying the header or not? Click on edit over here, and here you can see there is no option which is available for you to modify the request header. All right, so now we have done this part. Then click on save over here. Okay, let's go to the test section over here just to validate whether we are able to request and call our Lambda with the proxy integration or not. So here I'm just going to put a parameter, name is equal to Rahul, and let's put with proxy integration, and then go at the bottom, then click on test over here. And here you can see the response is coming back, which is this response, but also keep in mind that here you will get a very big response. So this is the response which is being rendered back. So it is not only returning this particular response, but is also throwing back the whole response body, which is this one. So this is comes handy when you use the proxy integration. So after that, click on deploy API over here. I'll close this message boxes, click on deploy, and here you can choose, then I can choose the new stage, and here I will choose dev and click on deploy. And here you can see it has been deployed. Let's copy the URL from here, go to our Postman, open a new tab, paste the URL, change the type to post over here, enter the name and the value, which is Rahul, and then click on send over here. And here you can see the message is coming back, and there is no modification in the name because we have not added any request or response modification. And here if I put my last name, then also it is going to throw back me the last name over here. So that's the basic difference between the proxy and the non-proxy integration of our Lambda with our AWS API gateway. Let's take a one step further, and now let's talk about the validators. So here is one example. So here is me who is passing a payload, which is this payload. And in this payload, or this is the request body in which I'm passing the name, email, and mobile number. And that parameters will be passed to our API gateway that will eventually processed by our Lambda. And is there any way through which we can validate the format of this particular request message? For example, here I'm passing a string, which is my name. Here I'm passing my email where it contains the email ID format, and here I'm passing my mobile number. So is there a way through which we can validate these request parameters before it's being processed by our Lambda or a backend service? So for the same reason, we have a feature which is available into our API gateway, which is called validators. And these validators helps us to validate our request body so that we process proper request body which is coming to our API gateway, and our backend services or Lambda, whatever we have configured, should be able to process the correct request body, and that will save a lot of our time. Let's take a look how should we implement a validator in our API gateway. So here again, this is me, and here this is my request body which contains different parameters, name, email, and mobile number. And here is our API gateway ready to process our request. But in the middle, we need to squeeze in our model, and this is the model which we need to create which will help us in validating our request. And these models are very simple. Those are just basic rule for validating our request, and that totally depends upon what kind of a payload we are sending through our API gateway. For example, in this particular payload, let's first try to validate my name or the name parameter. So in general, the name parameter will only contain a string. So we should have that kind of a validation implemented inside our model. So here, if you take a look, then here is the property which you can see, and this property is key as name, type as string, and the minimum length should be 1. So these are the basic validation we have imposed onto this particular name attribute. Secondly, there is another attribute which is called email over here. So here we have a validation for email. The type is a string and the format is email. So you can readily use this format which is available for you to validate your email ID which is present into your payload. So that's how we are validating name and email. And similarly, here is another attribute which is mobile number, which I'm also passing over here. And this mobile number, like, it has 9 digits in it. So I have just imposed a very basic validation rule over here where I have defined the minimum and the maximum. But instead of that, you can use the regular expression or a regex as well. And additional properties, I have set it to false. So these are the properties which we need to validate into our request body, and this is the format through which you can create your model. So this model is very simple, and you don't need to know anything specific. It's just that you just need to follow certain syntax over here, and you can create your own request model which can validate the request body. Let's jump to our AWS console and start implementing our new API gateway through our request model, which will validate our request body. So here I'm going to click on create a new API. I'm going to choose the REST API over here, and here I'm going to put the name. So here I'm going to put like a request validator API. And rest of the thing I'm just going to keep as it is. Click on create API over here. After that, we need to create a resource. That's where we are going to define which kind of a API URL it should have. Then here you can see the resource path, and here I am going to put a resource name which will act as our URI or URL. So here I'm just gonna name it request validator API. Click on create resource. After that, we have created our resource. Then we need to create our method. That's where we need to define which type of method it is going to be. Is it going to be get, put, post, or update? So click on create method over here, and here select it as a post. Select the Lambda, and here I'm just going to use the existing Lambda. So I'm going to use the non-proxy Lambda over here. It doesn't matter. The Lambda is just going to return whatever I'm sending. It is going to return it back to me. It's a very simple implementation. And here I can show you that particular Lambda as well. So here I'm getting the event, and here I'm returning the event. That's it. So whatever I'm getting in the event, I'm just returning it back over here. So the implementation is quite simple. All right. Now let's focus on the model and the validator. Okay, so here is our method, and then what we need to do is like create a method over here. Okay, so now our method has been created. Now we need to take care of our model, which is a validator, which will validate our request body. So where we can create that model. So first of all, I'm going to show you where it is visible or where we need to enable, and then I'm going to show you where we can create that particular model. So first of all, click on the method request over here. And here it will open at the bottom, and then click on edit over here in the method request, and here in the request body, and here you can see the add model. So here in the drop down list, first of all we need to type over here application JSON, and here in the drop down list we need to add our request model. Now we know that where we need to add our model. So let me show you where we can create the model. So let's cancel over here, and on the left hand side, which you can see here is the model. So this is the option which is available into our our AWS API gateway. So we need to use this option over here. So click on this model over here. and then click on create model. And here we can put a name. So here we are going to put demo request validator. All right, here I'm going to put a content type, which is going to be application for JSON. And here is the model schema. So I have already shown the model schema, which is this one. So this is the model schema. I'm just going to paste inside our model body or the schema. So here I'm just going to copy from my notepad. Let me copy it from my notepad and paste it over here, and here model schema. So this is going to be the model schema for validating our request body. Then click on create over here, and here you can see our demo request validator has been created. Now we need to attach this to our method request. So go to resources over here, click on this particular method, click on the method request, and here you can see the method request setting. Click on edit over here, and here choose the option like validate body, query string parameters. Even you can choose or restrict only for validate body, but let's go with this particular options. And in the request body, click on add model, and here you need to type application JSON. And here you can see the model is visible, which we have just created. Select that particular model, click on save over here. And after that, we should be able to verify. So now what we need to do over here is to deploy this API. Otherwise, this model will not be effective. So click on deploy over here, and the option I'm going to choose is a new stage. And here I'm going to put dev over here and click on deploy. All right, so it is deployed now. Let's validate our API gateway and try to play around with our request body and see if our validator is working or not. So here, go to stages. We just first need to find out the URL. So click on post over here, copy this URL from here for our API gateway. Go to your postman and change it to post and paste the URL over here. In the body, we need to add our request body. So let me copy that request body as well over here. So that request body will contain the name, email, and the mobile number. So I'm just going to copy and paste over here, and I'm just going to click on send over here. And here you can see it is responding it back properly, and I'm getting the response exactly what I wanted. But how should I validate whether our validator is working or not? So let's try to modify something. So let's remove the @ over here in the email, and then click on send request. And here you can see invalid request body. It is throwing me an error, which means our validator is working and it is in active mode. And if I add it back over here, then try to click on send once again, and here you can see the response is coming back. Similarly, if I try to increase the number over here in the mobile number, then it should throw me an error, invalid request body. So that's how you can implement the validator in your API gateway, and you can make your validator more streamlined and more accurate so that all the request bodies are validated before it hits your Lambda. And this will save a lot of your money because you are saving the cost of executing a Lambda on incorrect requests, because your API gateway is blocking all of those requests because your request body is incorrect. So yeah, this is how you can use and implement your validators inside your API gateway. Let's take one step further, and now we are talking about how to enable the Cloudwatch log for our API gateway. And enabling the Cloudwatch log will really help you to troubleshoot any issues which are happening with your API gateway. And it is really insightful when you are running your production workload and someone need to go there and look after your health and the problems with your API gateways and the APIs which you have deployed. So let's take a look like what is the procedure and how you can enable the Cloudwatch log. So here is your API gateway, and to push your log to the Cloudwatch, you need to have a certain IAM role. So what we are going to do first, we are going to create this IAM role, and once we have created this IAM role, then we are going to associate with our API gateway, and then in each API we'll be able to use this particular role to push the log into our Cloudwatch. And in the Cloudwatch we will have a log group, and these log groups will be uniquely identified by the API ID. So for example, if there are 10 APIs available over here in the API gateway, then each API have its own unique ID, and that unique ID will have their unique log group over there so that you can identify and take a look onto the logs for troubleshooting. Let's start with our first step. So first of all, I'm going to create a IAM role. So go to IAM section over here. Go to the role section over here, and here click on create role. And here I'm just going to search for the service, which is going to be our API gateway. Click on the API gateway. Click on next over here. So this is a default API gateway push to Cloudwatch Log permission, which is already available for you. You don't need to create that one. So it is readily available for you to consume. Then click on next over here, and here you can put the name. So here I can assign a name like API gateway Cloudwatch IAM role. Okay. Then after that, I'll go further down and click on create role over here. Okay, so here I have created that particular role. So I'll click on that particular role once again. So this is the role which I have created. I need to copy this ARN name or ARN number, whatever you want to call it. And then what we need to do, let's start from our API gateway once again. Click on this API gateway. Go to the settings over here. Go here, you will find the options for a logging. Click on edit over here, and here you need to enter the ARN, and then click on the save over here. Just make sure there are no white spaces over there. Click on save changes over here, and now you have associated that particular role with your API gateway. Now, how to enable the logging for each API? So we have done the role integration with our API gateway, which is like for a whole API gateway, but we need to enable the logging for each API. So right now here you can see there are 4 APIs which I have deployed. So what I'll do, I'll choose one API which I have recently deployed, which is a request validator. So click on that one. And here you need to click on stages. Let me highlight it over here in the stages section. Click on this stages over here, and here you will find an option for logging and tracing. All right, click on edit, and here you just need to toggle on and off. So here instead of off, I'm going to choose errors, info, and logs. You can set the levels to errors only, but I would recommend to put it for errors and info logs so that it is easy for you to troubleshoot and develop new APIs. So select that one, and if you want to have a detailed matrices, then you can select this one also, tracing also, then select that one also. Okay, so I'll leave it up to you like how you want to enable these options for your business requirement, but I'll just go with these options. Then click on save over here, and now we have enabled the Cloudwatch logging for our APIs in our API gateway. Now the question is like, how will you find the logs in our Cloudwatch log group? So for that, what you need to do is you need to go on to API section, and here for each API you will have a ID, which is this one, which is unique for your API. So right now we have enabled for this particular API. So I'm going to copy this ID over here, and I'm going to open the Cloudwatch. Click on this particular Cloudwatch, and here go to the log groups, and here type that particular unique ID, and here you can see you can find the log group for your particular API. Click on that particular API, and here you will find all the log stream which are getting updated as soon as you will start accessing your APIs. So let's click on that one, and here you will find all the traces like hey, if method is completed, then here you can see 200, and if there are some problem, there is, you can see the request validator. So everything is available over here in the log group. So if anything goes wrong, then you can just jump over here and take a look onto the logs, what is happening with your API and how it is behaving. So that's how you configure the log group or the Cloudwatch with your API gateway, and specifically with your particular API. Let's move further, and in this session we are going to talk about the resource policies on our AWS API gateway. and why the resource policies are so important. So let me give you an example which will give you more clarity on how the resource policy works onto the API gateway. So here onto the screen you can see here is our API gateway where we have deployed our API services, and here is our resource policy which you can see which I have created. Don't worry, I'm gonna cover this resource policy into the demo. And this resource policy is really simple, and here I'm just trying to do the deny. I would like to deny the API access or the API which I have deployed onto my AWS API gateway. And this deny, I'm doing it onto this particular IP address. This is my own public IP of my personal laptop. So I just wanted to test that whether I would like to deny certain IPs and will it be possible or not. So with the resource policy, you can set certain restrictions through which you can deny this IP addresses from accessing this particular API which is running on our API gateway service. And as a result of it, either they will be allowed or either they will be denied over here. So right now, once we jump into the demo, I'm going to show you this deny policy and how to apply those. But also there are a few things which you need to keep in mind while setting up this resource policy. So right now this is an IP address, but instead of that, you can also set a IP ranges using the CIDR block. And also you can restrict not only based on IP, you can use the account IDs of our AWS. So if you have a multi-tenant system, then you can use the multiple AWS account and set the rule for blocking those multiple AWS account from accessing this particular API. Apart from that, there are like VPC IDs also you can use, VPC CIDR range also you can use. So there are various combinations which are available for you to create this resource policy which allows and denies based on your business needs. So this is what we are going to cover, and now let's jump into our AWS console and set this resource policy to deny from my personal laptop so that we can see it actually works. Alright, so here is my API which I have deployed previously. So first of all, let's validate this API without using the resource policy so that we can see that we are allowed to access this particular API without using the deny resource policy. So to do that, let's go to the Postman, and here's the URL. And if I click on send over here, then here I'm getting the response back. So here you can see I'm passing the new param 1, then let's change it to 2 and see once again. And here you can see the response is coming back. Now let's apply the resource policy for deny, and for that I need the IP address of my personal laptop. So to do that, I can go to what is my IP, and here you can see this is the IP 94.234.83.13 is the IP of my particular personal laptop, and I would like to deny the access to this particular API through the resource policy. Okay, so now I know the IP, then go back to your API gateway, the API. You remember that you need to be inside your API, and there you will find the option for a resource policy over here. So go to that resource policy, click on it and click on create policy. And here you will find 3 options, which is AWS account, IP range deny, and source VPC. So AWS account, where you can allow and deny various AWS account from accessing this API. Then we have IP ranges where you can specify a single IP as well as a long IP ranges to allow and deny. And then third one is the VPC, where you can specify the VPC ID to allow and deny. In my case, I'm going to use the IP range, but in general, the same concepts apply for account as well as for VPC deny. Alright, so there is a ready-made template which is available for you. So we just need to customize this template for our need to apply our policy. So first of all, let me copy my IP address which I need to deny. So here in the deny section, which source IP I would like to deny. So that's where I'm gonna put my own IP address. So here put double quotes and put your IP address. Okay. After that, we need to specify the address of our API. So here we just need to remove this part, and here we can use the actual URL which include the stage as well as the API name. So here you can see this is our stage name and this is our API name. All right. And the same thing which we need to copy from here, and here we need to paste it over here. Now you might be asking, hey, this is a deny and this is allow. How can it recite both at the same place? So whenever you have a deny and allow, then deny always takes a preference. So deny will always takes a higher preference and it will apply that first rule, and after that it will not apply any other rule. All right. Okay, so after that, click on save changes over here, and after you saved the changes, go to the resources, and here we need to redeploy this API to make this resource policy in effect. Click on deploy API, choose from the drop down which is dev. Remember to choose the same stage. If you have previously deployed your application or API, then we need to deploy and update onto the same stage. Click on deploy over here. And now we have deployed our API. So you need to wait a few seconds before this policy get active. So okay, so now what I'll do, I'll just go back to my Postman and hit the URL and try to see if I'm allowed or denied. Here onto the screen, you can see this is the Postman. So let's prepare the URL. So here, change it to the post and paste the URL, and the URL which you can find it from the API. So if you go to the stages and then click on dev and the name of the API, and then click on the post, and here you will find the URL. All right. After that, in the param section, I'm just going to pass the param. So it is going to be param, and let's pass any random value here. New value, let's put 2. And now we have a resource policy which is denying based on my public IP of my personal laptop. So just click on send over here, and here you can see user anonymous is not authorized to perform this particular action. So which means our resource policy is active and it is actively denying the request coming and originating from my personal laptop. So that's how you can modify and work with your resource policy to allow and deny any request coming to your API. Let's talk about the next concept, which is an authorizer in our AWS API gateway. So far, we have developed the API where we were exposing those API publicly. So anyone with the URL can access those API. If you're developing an open source project where you want to have those API open for everyone, then it's fine. But in case if you want to secure your API and you want to put certain kind of authorization and authentication, then you need to use the authorizers in our AWS API gateway. So let's take a look how it would work in our API gateway. So here, this is a very simplistic representation of our flow. So here on the screen, you can see this is a user who is trying to access an API gateway. Then we need to have an authorizer in between before it accesses this particular API. And this authorizer will authenticate that particular user with the credential, and once it is authenticated, then that API will be exposed to that particular user. So this is the purpose of authorizer, to secure your API. Let's take a look like how we are going to implement this authorization service in our API gateway. So here we are going to first set up an authorization Lambda over here. And this authorization Lambda is responsible for validating the user request. So this is a user who is trying to access this particular API inside our API gateway. There we are going to set up an authorization, and there we have an option of setting up that particular authorization. That authorization is going to point to authorization Lambda. And in this Lambda, we will have a validation logic which is implemented. And once the request goes to authorization Lambda, then it releases the policy which allows or denies to access this particular API. So from this particular Lambda, the response will come back after the validation, whether it is allowed or whether it is denied. If it is allowed, if it is green, then we can access this particular API. So that's how the flow would look like. Here, the flow is very simple, but in general, these are the crucial things which will be happening behind the scenes once we implement the authorizer. So let's go to our AWS portal in our AWS API gateway, and let's try to implement this whole authorization flow. Here is my AWS portal, and here are the list of APIs which I have deployed in the past. So I'm going to use one of these APIs to create our authorizer. But first, let me show you how you can create an authorizer for any of your existing APIs. So click on this one of the API which is over here, and on the left hand side you will find the option for an authorizer. And it doesn't matter what kind of APIs you have, whether you have a proxy, non-proxy, or it is communicating with the Lambda. So it doesn't matter. Authorizer options will always be there for you. All right. So here on the left hand side, you just need to click on the authorizer. And here you can see there is no authorizer which we have created so far, which means this particular API which is available over here should be accessible publicly. So let me show you with the Postman. So here you can see, I'm just gonna dismiss this one, and here just see this is a non-proxy API which I'm trying to access. So click on send over here. And here you can see the response is coming back. So this is a public API as of now, but we need to secure this particular API. And for that, we need to create an authorizer over here. Okay, so click on authorizer and then I'll show you the next thing. So there are a couple of options which we need to create for authorization, either Lambda or Cognito. But in this case, we are going to go with the Lambda over here. So to create authorization, we need to create an authorization Lambda, and that Lambda ARN we need to paste it over here. All right. So right now we don't have that Lambda. So first of all, we need to create that authorization logic inside that Lambda. So let's jump to the Lambda section. Let's first create the Lambda and then we will jump back to the authorization part. So here is my Lambda section. So here let's go and click on create function, and here I'm going to create a Lambda API authorizer. Here from the dropdown, select the version, which is Python 3.10. You can choose any version of which you want. And after that, if you go further, then click on create functions. And also we need to update the code over here. I'll go show you. Let me copy it from the notepad, and here just dismiss this message which we don't need. And here in the body section, you can see this is the default Lambda function, but we don't need to use this particular function over here. So let's remove this part and paste the code which we want for authorizer. So here you can see this is the code, and here in this code I'm gonna first show you the Lambda handler. So this is where the execution will start for our Lambda. So here you can see in the request header we will be passing a parameter called authorization token, and the value of that token should be this. If this is getting passed in our request, then it will be allowed to access that particular API. So right now we are passing this value, so we just need to also make a logic to allow and deny that particular resource. And how to do that? So here once we pass that authorization token and the value is this, if that condition is matching over here, this is the condition which I have put, then we will put a allow. Otherwise we are going to put a deny over here. All right, and this particular function generate API resource is going to generate a policy for allow and deny. So once the valid token has been passed and this condition has been met, which is this one, then we are going to generate a policy, and this policy will contain, this is a typical AWS IAM policy. So here we are going to pass the version, here we are going to call the action, and whenever you're calling an API, then the API is going to be invoke API. Otherwise you will not be able to call. So that's the permission which we need to assign. So we are assigning an invoke. The effect which we are passing over here is allow and deny, and here we are passing it the resource ARN. So this policy will be generated, and this policy will allow that particular request to whether to allow that API to access or not. Okay, so this is a typical Lambda which we need to implement, and I'll paste the code of this particular Lambda into my blog post, which you will find into the description section. So feel free to copy this code and use it for your own purpose. Okay, so now we have designed this or implemented this particular Lambda. So we need to deploy this particular Lambda. So click on deploy over here, and this will deploy the Lambda. Okay, so now we have deployed the Lambda. Now, after creating the Lambda, the authorizer Lambda, let's create an authorizer in our API. So we were working with the non-proxy API. So click on that particular API, go to the left-hand section, go to the authorizer over here. And in this authorizer, we need to click on create authorizer, click on create authorizer. And here we can type in the name of our authorizer. So authorizer for non-proxy Proxy API. It's just a custom name, and as I already told you, it does not have any dependency on any kind of a API. You can use any kind of a API, which is proxy, non-proxy, gate, put, post, anything. So authorization will work on any of the APIs. Okay, so here choose the Lambda. Now we need to choose the Lambda for authorization where our validation logic exists for authorization. So I'm going to select the authorizer over here, Lambda API authorizer, which we have just created. Select that one, and after that we need to select the token. So here just go to the code over here, and I remember that previously my screen had just frozen for a second and I couldn't show you the Lambda authorizer deployment. So here you can see, you should see the successful message after you deploy the Lambda. Okay, but anyway, so what we need to do is we need to copy this key, that authorization token key, from here. Go to your API gateway, in the authorizer section, type in the value, that authorization token, and click on create authorizer. Okay, so now our authorizer has been created. Now the next thing is we need to validate this authorizer before we attach it to our API. So select this particular authorizer over here, go to or maybe click on this authorizer link over here, and then you will find the option for a test authorizer. So what we need to do over here is to copy that particular token. So copy this particular token from here, go to authorizer section, token value, and click on test authorizer. And here you can see it is returning 200 and it is allow. So which means it is allowing us to invoke or execute that particular API. So let me change the value a bit, and I'm adding a random character onto this particular token, and then click on test authorizer. And here you can see it is denying me. So our authorization logic is working fine, and we are getting allow and deny policy based on the token value what we are passing in. All right, so now we have tested our authorizer. So let's attach this authorizer with our API. To attach this authorizer with our API, go to the resources over here, click on the post API, and here you will find the option into the integration request. Click on edit. Sorry, it's not into the integration request. Let me go back, go to the method request over here and click on edit this method request, and here you will find the option for authorization, which is visible over here. Okay, so close this one. I'll close this message also over here. So here from the drop down, I'm going to choose the authorizer. So this is the authorizer which we have created. Let me show you back once again. So here, this is the authorizer which we have created recently for with our Lambda. So select this authorizer over here, and after that you just need to click on save over here. And once you save it, the one thing which you need to keep in mind that you need to deploy the API once again, otherwise this authorizer setting will not be active. So here click on deploy it, close this message over here, click on deploy, select the same stage, or if you want to create a new stage, then you can create that one also. Click on dev over here and click on deploy. And it will deploy your authorizer and it will update your API, and now your API will ask you for token, and if you don't pass that token, then it will not be allowed to access that particular API. Let's try to execute this API without passing the authorization token, and it should give me an unauthorized error. So click on send over here, and here you can see the message which it is throwing me is unauthorized. So right now what we need to do is we need to pass on the authorization token. So we will go into the headers, and here we are going to implement the authorization token. So let's get back to our API token. So here I'm going to copy the value, which is key, and paste the key over here, and here in the value I'm just going to pass the token. So make sure you copy the correct value over here, otherwise you might be thrown an error about unauthorization. So here I'm passing the value, and after that click on send. And here you can see the value which is returned back is the response which I was sending it with my request. So this is the request in which I have included these parameters, and it is responding me back with the same response with the 200. So which means our authorization is working and it is executing the request based on the token which I'm passing. So for example, now if I want to change it and I'm adding some few more characters here and then click on send, and here you can see user is not authorized to access this resource with the explicit deny policy. So that's how you can implement the authorization in your API gateway with Authorizer, and that will allow you to secure your API gateway.